Brad Edwards, ESPN college football analyst. Brad, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, that video is one that I wrote the script for and voiced about a month ago because Alabama's October schedule was so weak. I knew there was no way they were going to lose or even play a close game. So I went ahead and did all the research, put the thing together, and we had it built to go ahead and run this week because 10 years ago today was when Texas Tech knocked off Texas in that last-second pass that Michael Crabtree caught, and Texas was number one at the time. And the next day, Alabama moved to number one in the AP poll for the first time under Saban, and there's been no turning back since then. This video just basically looks at some of those numbers related to number one in the AP poll that are just jaw-dropping in terms of how they compare to the rest of college football history.
Yeah, Brad, give us a couple of those because I'm going to encourage the audience to go to ESPN, or if you want to do ESPN.com, or you can go to our Twitter account at The Game on 1029, and we just retweeted the link where you can go and watch the video that Brad's breaking this down. But maybe just some eye-opening numbers for you, maybe something that stuck out to you personally.
Well, I'll give you one of them because there are basically only three. There are three sections to this, but the one that is really more recent, Alabama has been number one in 40 of the last 43 AP polls. And just for perspective on that, prior to this stretch, the record for most times ranked number one in a 50-week span was 33, and that was by USC under Pete Carroll. So Alabama has already broken that record by 7, and they still have 7 more weeks to add to it. So I mean, if they were to basically win out the rest of the season, they would have been number one in 47 of the last 50 AP polls. And when you consider the previous record was 33, I mean that is just. And then the graphic that you'll see before that one in this piece is another one that if you just sit there and look at it for a while and stop and think about it, it's another one that you're like, wow, what you're watching in Tuscaloosa is something really, really special. And I think most people know that, but maybe you don't even understand the magnitude of it.
Brad, do you have any doubt this is the greatest college football dynasty that's ever happened?
No. As far as dynasty, now look, I mean, whether this team this year, this is
just
is the greatest of all time.
Just overall this run.
Yeah, exactly. That's a discussion for another day. But someday in January. But yeah, what's been done, and look, and what I did in this piece is I tried to just take it outside of the context of national championships, and we already know that it's 5 and 9 years, which has never been done before in this poll era, and certainly if they were to win again this year, 6 and 10 years is way beyond what anybody's done, and so just from a championships perspective. You can't compare it to anything else. It's clearly the best, but even beyond that, I mean, you just look at the consistency of it over time, and this kind of, like I said, looks at the poll rankings and how that plays into it. And then, I know we've talked about it a lot. Also, I guess a big reason for them being number one this many weeks in a 10-year span is because they don't lose to teams that they shouldn't lose to. And you look around college football and you see everyone else being susceptible to these upsets, especially against unranked teams, and Alabama doesn't lose those games. And if you go back throughout the history of the sport, you don't see that. It's just, and that to me is really the backbone of all of this, is that their ability to be focused well enough from week to week that they never lose a game to a team that shouldn't be on the field with them.
Right. Give me some thoughts about Alabama LSU. Do you think this is a closer game? Experts in the desert have this game right now that opened up at 14. It's traveled up to 15 at several spots out in Vegas. Where does Brad Edwards have this game?
I don't look at this game as being close. And the people who sit around me know that I kind of go out of my way. As an Alabama alum, I go out of my way not to praise Alabama any more than I have to, because I'm going to get all the accusations of being a homer, But when it's so obvious, I have no choice but to go there for my own credibility. And this week is one where, look, I get it. LSU's ranked number 3. They just beat a really good Georgia team by 20. The game is at night at Tiger Stadium. I understand all that. I've been there for those games before. But when it comes down to answering the question of what does LSU need to do to have a chance to win this game, I mean, people throw out a lot of different things, but I just can't see how any of them would actually happen. I mean, people talk about turnovers, for example. Okay, LSU goes and wins the turnover battle, gets some short fields. Okay, I mean, it sounds good, but the issue is that Tua has turned the ball over one time this season. Hasn't thrown a pick, and it's not just Tua. I mean, this is something that's ingrained in Alabama quarterbacks. We've seen this for this whole decade that we've been talking about. And if you go back to the previous 17 games, before Tua with Jalen as the starter, Alabama's starting quarterback has 4 turnovers in the last 25 games.
Oh, wow.
That's insane. That's just, and when you already have the most talented team in the country and then you don't give your opponent anything, that's how you keep winning games. So I don't think LSU is going to make any headway off of them. Look, they might get one. Maybe he'll throw his first pick. I don't know. But there's no evidence to suggest there's going to be this avalanche of turnovers by Alabama that's going to help LSU out. You look at LSU's offense, and while they're all obviously great athletes, they wouldn't be at LSU if they're not, there's no position group on that offense that scares me, especially not if I have a defense the caliber of Alabama's. So I just don't see how LSU scores a lot of points. And so then it comes down to, how much could they realistically slow down Alabama's offense? And Alabama's offense, for as great as they've been, they're tough to get a handle on because of how little the starting unit has played, as far as the percentage of games. And when you consider, okay, you can take all the first halves, and I think those are representative of what Alabama's offense is. And they're averaging 39 points per first half. If you were to just ask the question, okay, if they were to leave Tua in and keep the pedal down for 4 straight quarters, what would they be scoring? Well, I think you double that. I mean, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 points per game. That's what they'd be scoring. And so if you say, okay, if LSU were able to cut that in half, just reduce Alabama's offensive productivity by half, then you're still looking at about 38 points allowed. And if Alabama scores 38, LSU has no chance. And so these are the types of things I'm looking at. For example, I hear about, okay, they've got these great corners, and they do. Greedy Williams, Christian Fulton, they're very good cornerbacks. No question the best corners Alabama's faced this year. But Jerry Jeudy, he's one of several really dangerous receivers Alabama has. He's the most dangerous, I think. He lines up in the slot the majority of the time. They're not going to cover him with their 2 best guys because they're not going to line them up in the slot. And so Alabama just presents so many matchup problems that it really is hard to see. Of course, then you throw the Devin White thing into it for the first half and all that. And I just don't see the path for LSU in order to pull the upset.
We're talking to Brad Edwards, ESPN college football analyst. And maybe it's even going back. College football playoff rankings released a couple of days ago. LSU at 3. You think they're the 3rd best team in college football?
I don't, and that's part of this. I mean, if you want to know why I don't really see that path for LSU or really think that they're going to keep this game close, I think they're one of the 10 best. I don't think they're one of the 5 best teams in the country. And look, they deserve to be ranked where they are. If you look at who they've beaten, then nobody has really a better body of work as far as a collection of wins than LSU. So they deserve to be there. I'm not going to take that away from them. But I don't see the level of dominance that you would expect from a team that's the 3rd best in the nation. Now, who is the 3rd best if it's not them? I do think this is a year where there's a pretty significant drop-off from the first 2. The big question for me is how big is the gap between 1 and 2? Because I think it's shrinking, not because Alabama's coming back to Clemson, but because Clemson's getting better and better. And it's not just simply the question of, okay, who has the best chance to beat Alabama, which I think the answer is Clemson. But I think Clemson is starting to separate itself from everyone else now that Trevor Lawrence, their quarterback, is really starting to find his groove, get comfortable in their offense, and they have down the field threat to go along with that great defense. So keep an eye on Clemson, because we could be looking at fourth year in a row with those two teams, Clemson and Alabama, meeting in the postseason.
Yeah, it really. I mean, we've talked about it all week long. When you look at Alabama and Clemson, so if you look at this gap after you get past Alabama, let me just start with this right here. Do you think there's a gap between Alabama and Clemson at 1 and 2?
Yes, I do. And I don't know that there's a significant gap. And really, I think how big of a gap is going to be determined by whether Alabama's defense continues to get better between now and the playoff. Because if we're sitting here, a month from now, and we're saying that, all right, we think Alabama's defense is good but not great, then I think I'm more likely to lean toward, okay, Clemson has a real chance here. If Alabama going into the playoff looks like the type of team that, look, even a explosive offense like Clemson is going to have a hard time, scoring more than 20 on them, then I think then it's much tougher to try to sell yourself on the idea of Clemson winning. But I think Clemson has the talent at almost every position, that you need to be able to beat a team like Alabama. But like I said, the big thing is going to be Alabama's defense, because Alabama's offense, I don't think there's any doubt that even a defense as good as Clemson is going to have a hard time. They can only hold them down so much. But if Alabama's defense is not able to do what we're used to seeing them do, then I think maybe Clemson would have a chance to score with Alabama.
Brett, is there a team, and I'll just summarize it by saying this, that you think would be a playoff kind of caliber team that you think could give Alabama and Clemson a run for the money and maybe push one of those guys out? Is there somebody that you say maybe they're not there yet, but they will be in a month? Is there a team that you would buy stock in?
Yeah, so I guess the way I would interpret this question is essentially if someone were to sabotage the Alabama-Clemson national championship game matchup, who would it be? Who could pull an upset of one of them in a semifinal? And right now, I would lean more toward Michigan than anyone else. I'm not going to completely dismiss Oklahoma, because I think their offense is that good. I need to see a lot more of them with the change of defensive coordinator to buy into their defense being good enough to win against a team like that. But, I think Michigan has a really good defense, and they are getting better and better offensively with Shea Patterson as he's, starting to get more acclimated to that team and that offense. I still, at the end of the day, don't think Michigan's offensive line is good enough against either Alabama or Clemson. And then, look, as good as Michigan's defense is and has been, they've been really good. They've been one of the best defenses in the country for 3 straight years now. If you look at their just game-by-game scores, they don't hold teams to single digits that often. And they don't allow 20 very often either. It's usually like, 10 to 14 points, somewhere in that range that they allow. And so I still just cannot imagine them holding a team like Alabama under 24. I mean, it's going to – and so that's where you really struggle with Michigan. But as we sit here right now, that's the team I would identify as the biggest threat playoff-wise to one of those teams. And in saying that, I'm kind of ignoring Georgia, just because if Georgia's going to do it, it's going to have to be, I think, in the SEC championship game. I don't see them getting into the playoff without beating Alabama before then. So that's why I'm not mentioning Georgia here.
Brad, can Kentucky give Georgia anything to make this a game on Saturday afternoon?
I think they can. And there are a couple reasons. I mean, one is that they're at home. I would not give Kentucky any chance in this game if it were in Athens. So the home field, I think, is big for them. And even though Kentucky had a very emotional, walk-off win last week, and sometimes it's difficult to bounce back from those, Saban, I've heard him tell the story about, just reminding people that the week after that Bluegrass miracle that his team won when he was at LSU, they got run out of Tiger Stadium in a night game the following weekend by Alabama. And so sometimes you worry about your team when they have a really emotional win like that, pull out one that they weren't expecting to win. But I think it's kind of balanced out by the fact that Georgia had a rivalry game last week. And, with a rivalry game, sometimes there's an emotional investment before the game even kicks off. And so I don't think it's going to be that easy for Georgia to be as ready to play this week as they were last week either. And then I think the final thing, and then once you get on the field and you start looking at, okay, how do they match up? Because clearly Georgia has the better players. That's not even up for debate. Georgia has struggled, relatively speaking, at stopping the run. I mean, we've seen teams that aren't even that good at quarterback have success running the ball on Georgia this year, and that's who Kentucky is. They don't throw the ball that well, but they can run it. And so I think that Kentucky's strength offensively matches up with Georgia's weakness, if you want to call it that. And that's important because Kentucky's not going to make a living throwing on anybody. They have to be able to run, and we've seen that you can run on Georgia. So I think if Kentucky can get out to a lead, they need to play from ahead. I think the first quarter is important for them. Then if they can do that, then I would give them certainly give them a chance. I don't know about a really good chance. I still pick Georgia to win, but I can see a path for Kentucky. Where I was saying earlier, I have a hard time seeing the path for LSU. I can see where Kentucky has a chance to make some plays.
Brad, final question. You go back to a tweet yesterday. One is getting a lot more national attention, but we could be watching two of the best quarterback seasons in the history of the sport. You guys have been tracking it, began back in 2004. Tua Tagovailoa, the best total QBR through October, 97.3. Kyler Murray, 97.2. And there is some big names in this total quarterback.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this is one where, I had, of course, noticed for a while that as much as we're talking about Tua and as great as he's been, Kyler Murray has never been that far behind him in total QBR. In fact, he's even gotten closer to him since that loss to Texas. And, for people who don't know how QBR works, it is adjusted for the quality of the defenses you're facing. So people might be inclined to say, well, look, he's going against these Big 12 teams. It's already taken that into account. And I mean, just look at his numbers. I mean, and look, I think it's also fair for us to acknowledge Alabama hasn't played great defenses up to this point either. Okay, so but you look at those two guys and what they're doing, and then you look at what other guys over the last 15 seasons have done through the month of October. And you mentioned the names. I mean, you've got like Russell Wilson, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, Andrew Luck. Those two guys, Tua and Kyler Murray, are ahead of all of them as far as best QBR through the month of October. And what it tells you is if they can keep this up down the stretch, these are going to be two of the greatest quarterbacking seasons in the history of the sport. And we're watching them go, kind of head to head with each other. And look, I still think as long as Alabama doesn't lose, the Heisman belongs to Tua. But if Alabama slips up somewhere, or if Tua plays a really bad game at some point, Kyler Murray is having the type of season that I think is very worthy of winning a Heisman, even though a lot of people will say, look, you know what, the Oklahoma quarterback won it last year. That tells you the system thing. It's a great system. Everybody has a system, but he's phenomenal. And what's crazy, and I know you saw it too, watching him play the little bit that he did in his one season at Texas A&M, I would have never believed he would be this good, because he seemed like a guy who was a threat to run, was not that refined of a passer. But he's not just a runner. I mean, you see his speed, his athleticism. He is tearing it up from the pocket, throwing the ball this year. And you can see why he was as big time of a recruit as he was.
Brad Edwards, ESPN college football analyst. Brad, as always, we thank you so much for your time. Where are you guys going Saturday?
Oh, we'll be in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
Watching it firsthand. I can't wait.
Gotcha. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate you for being a part of the show.
You got it, Ryan. Take care.